The choice is yours.
You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. I think you get with this, cause this is where it's at. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. I think you get with this, cause this is kind of fat.
Come on, where's the black sheep? Here's the black sheep. Even if we wanted to, the clock.
All right, and welcome back to another session of virtual professional development here at Uniondale High School. And today we are going to be talking about 3D and Danielson assessment. I want you to check this video out.
Wait a minute. 5 C's in a row? One of these has to be wrong. Alright, let me double check my answers. 3x plus 5 equals 20. Subtract the 5. X equals 5. Answer is C. 4x equals 24. X equals 6. Answer is C. 14 times 22 over 7. Answer is C. Also C. Answer is C. That's unheard of. 5 C's in a row? In a single instance, the probability of the answer being C is 1 in 4. For that to happen 5 times in a row is a 0.098% chance, which is very unlikely, but if I take into account the total number of tests I've ever taken from kindergarten to high school, that number becomes near 95%, which makes this event very likely to happen. Let's move on. What kind of triangle is this? All sides are equal, meaning it's an equilateral. The answer is C. Impossible! That now makes it a 0.024% chance. Unless someone deliberately picked all the answers to be C. No, it can't be. I can see the panic in all these kids' faces already.
All right, so teachers and students, you might know how this feels. A little bit of test anxiety. You're taking an exam and the answers don't seem quite right, but you do feel confident, like, I feel like I got it right, but you question it. And then there's some teachers that do purposely create assessments just to bother you just a little bit. So today, the title of our presentation is Harnessing the Power of Assessment, Mastering Danielson's D3, an exploration of Danielson's Framework, Component 3D, using assessment and instruction, and how to leverage assessment to improve student learning. The research question that guides a lot of the work that we're going to be doing today is how can teachers effectively utilize assessment to drive instruction and foster student learning in Danielson's Component 3D. Now, we've gone through all of the components of Danielson, Domain 1, Domain 2, Domain 3. We'll look at Domain 4 a little bit in terms of professional growth, but this is the last component of Danielson 3 that we'll be looking at, which is assessment. Now, the question that we ask is, what is Domain 3D? Domain 3D speaks to ongoing monitoring of student learning, continuously gathering data on student understanding through methods like exit slips, classroom discussions, and informal assessments. Also providing feedback, giving students timely, specific, and actionable feedback to help them improve their performance and identify areas of growth. Some of the key terms there, timely, specific, and actionable. We'll be talking a little bit about that later. Encouraging self-assessment, and this is huge, specifically for students. Empowering students to reflect on their own learning, identify their strengths and weaknesses, and take ownership of their progress. What's really important for teachers is to make sure that students see the good things that they're doing. Sometimes students really beat up on themselves, they don't feel great as scholars, and you always want to pick apart some of the areas in the content that they know really well and use that as a starting point to encourage them to do a little bit better. And ultimately, the point of having assessment and ongoing assessment is to modify instruction. Using assessment data to analyze student needs and adapt teaching strategies, pacing, and activities to better meet the needs of individual learners. And I was thinking about myself as a leader and transitioning from New York City into Long Island. I had to make some modifications with my leadership based on the data, based on what was happening in the school. I had to change the way that I address teachers and students and parents, and I'm still figuring it out. So we have to make those changes in order to improve our practice and also to improve outcomes for students. By integrating these key elements, Component 3D helps teachers create a dynamic, data-driven classroom that fosters student growth and achievement. There's a great theory that I did a little bit of research on that I wanted to share with you guys. And the name of this theory is called cognitive load theory, understanding how we learn. Cognitive load theory is a fundamental principle in the field of learning and instruction which seeks to understand how the human cognitive system processes and retains information. It provides valuable insights into the limitations of our working memory and the strategies we can use to enhance learning. Now, there's a couple of components that we should think about when we look at cognitive load theory. One is intrinsic load. Inherently complex material that's really challenging to understand. Next, there's extraneous load, which is unnecessary distractions or poor design. And finally, germane load. This explains the efforts devoted to understanding the key elements of the content. The important thing that we need to do when we're creating assessments and when we're teaching students is effective instruction minimizes extraneous load and maximizes germane load to optimize learning. And what that means is that anytime you're given an exam, we sometimes include information that's not necessarily important, or we spend too much time on certain areas of the content that we shouldn't because it's not essential to the student learning. We have to focus more attention to what is germane, what's really important for students. When I think about myself as a leader, I have to focus on what's the most important thing in a school. And for me, what's the most important thing in school is making sure that we have a safe learning environment. That speaks to domain 2 in Danielson. And also making sure that instruction is of high quality. All the other things that goes on in the school, it kind of falls into place when you take care of those most important things. That's germane to leading a school. And always look at assessment as a process. It's not the end-all, be-all. It's something that's ongoing, that's going to happen throughout the entire school year. Exit slips. I know all of the students here can relate to that exit slip. What I've noticed, and this is just an observation, this is sometimes the hardest part of the lesson to get to for teachers. Sometimes there's great conversation happening, there's peer group stuff that's happening, there's speeches that are taking place, and then when it's time to get an exit slip going, it's kind of hard to get to it. So we want to make sure that we get to our exit slips and give students enough time to answer the questions that we have. This is your proof that the students have learned in the classroom. Student discussion. What happens sometimes with student discussion is the student that's always doing all of the work has to carry the entire conversation and act as if the other students are actually participating. That's why it's important when you have student discussions that you have specific roles. You have a person that's presenting, doing research, taking notes. So student discussions are a great way to informally assess students, but you also want to make sure that they have clear roles. Quizzes. My advice with quizzes is to have them at the beginning of the period. That's a time to activate prior knowledge and make sure that your students get into the classroom on time. So have a short 4-question assessment that's low stakes to, one, get students into the classroom and also to get them engaged and to gauge if they remembered what you taught the day before. Classroom observations. Now, traditionally in school settings, classroom observations are very formalized with an administrator and a teacher. My advice is to have colleagues come in and look at how you teach and give you some soft feedback. I realize that teachers listen to teachers a little bit more than administrators. It's not personal. I take no offense to it. But sometimes it's good to have, if you're a newer teacher, have a veteran come in and give you some feedback on your practices to help you improve your instruction. And a reflective journal. Asking students to reflect on their learning in a journal can foster metacognition and self-assessment. Having students write just a little bit about their experience in your classroom helps you as a teacher, and it also helps them as a student process what's going on in the classroom for them. Feedback to students. Provide students with timely, specific, and actionable feedback is crucial for their growth and development. Effective feedback helps students understand their strengths and areas for improvement, enabling them to take ownership of their learning and make targeted adjustments. Now, in terms of student feedback, a check mark, smiley face, a sticker, a thumbs up, we can't really, as a student, you can't gauge what that means. You don't know if you're receiving that because you're a nice person or because you actually understand the work. So we have to move away from those forms of assessments and give them something actionable. You did a really great job citing evidence when you talked about this historical document. What I would also encourage you to do is to infer your own personal opinion on this historical document and summarize it. That's clear. A check plus, not too clear. And sometimes teachers, they don't want to give actionable feedback to students because they have 150 students sometimes at a time. And I want to talk about that a little bit. Student self-reflection. Instead of the teacher being the person that's always taking care of the assessments, have students help you out with their own reflections. Peer assessment checklists. If you are teaching 150 to 200 students, there's no way you can give quality feedback, the feedback that you want to give to a student, to 150 kids. Have students assess one another. This is a great way to address some of the little areas that you might not be able to go over with every single student. I think it's also a great way to work on their social skills, their comprehension skills, their reading, their writing, their speaking, and their listening. Peer assessments. Next, student self-evaluation prompts. Here's a worksheet with reflection questions that guide students to evaluate their own learning process. And again, this helps students to think about how they learn. Metacognition. So for me, personally, I learn best when there's some music playing, when I am engaged in another activity and it's not too silent. I like to have a little bit of noise because that helps me to learn. I like to draw. That helps me remember things. For whatever reason, when I was younger, I would always kind of tag up the side of my paper while I was learning something. And what I realized later on is the way that my brain works, I memorialize what I'm learning through the artwork that I created on the side, and I would remember all of the notes that I took. That's the way that I learn. So you want students to think about how they learn and how they can improve their learning. And have students set goals, a template where students can set personalized learning goals and track their progress. We want our students to take a little bit more ownership of the learning process and it not just be on you as a teacher. Modifying instruction. To me, as an administrator, this is one of the most challenging tasks for most folks. Making a decision to modify instruction is one admitting that you need to grow and change. That's difficult for a lot of people to simply say, I need to be better. I need to change the way that I'm doing something. In reflection, that happened to me when I came here from Brooklyn. I was engaging the students in a certain way that wasn't necessarily beneficial to the students because it's a different demographic, it's a different setting, and I had to modify it. And at first, you deal with your ego, you deal with your pride, and you feel like, I shouldn't have to change anything because what I've done has worked for X amount of years. Then you realize, then it's really not about children, it's about me and making sure that I feel good. Once I realized that, I said, hey, I need to make some changes. Hold on to what's good, but also think about how I can change just a little bit. So here it says, collect assessment data, gather various types of assessments, such as exit slips, classroom discussions, quizzes, observational notes. This data should provide insights into student understanding and mastery. Next, carefully review the assessment data to identify trends, patterns, and areas of strength and weakness. Look for common misconceptions or learning gaps that need to be addressed. So I'll give you an example. If a teacher gives a quiz and everyone gets, and it's 4 questions, and everyone gets the 3rd question wrong, there's 2 ways you can go as an educator. One way you can go is, these kids, they don't listen to smartphones, social media. You can list all of the reasons that you can justify why the student got it wrong. And you're right to an extent. Or you can look back at how you taught that point and say, you know what, probably I didn't explain it the right way. Probably I need to change it. And to take the guesswork out of it, just ask the students. Hey guys, when I taught you guys about two-step equations, what didn't I explain? Because I feel like I missed something. When you create that type of rapport with students, their performance actually increases and your workload decreases because now you're not teaching in a vacuum. You're specifically teaching to what the students need and not just the entire scope and sequence of a given curriculum. Modifying your instruction, talked about that a little bit. And look at the impact. This is a constant cycle over and over again. You gather information, you analyze it, you modify your instruction, and then you evaluate the impact. This is something you have to do on a consistent basis over and over again. The danger in being in this profession is that we get tired of going through this cycle and we get stuck at a certain point. You have to make a decision to change on your own. Some people feel, or administrators at times feel like, well, you know what, if I write this person up enough, then they'll change. Not really. They'll change in front of you and go back to whatever they were doing before you came. It's really upon the educator to look at themselves and say, this is something that I need to work on and I want to change. And that's not something that happens through write-ups. It's not how that works. Here's a perfect example of how to look at data and modify your instruction. Let's consider the case of Mr. Johnson, 5th grade math teacher. Recognizing that should be him, that her students were struggling with fractions, she used a series of quick quizzes and exit slips to identify specific areas of difficulty. Based on this data, she adjusted her lessons, providing targeted small group instruction and hands-on activities to help students better understand fraction concepts. So this is a teacher that's reflective, and I'm proud to say that at Uniondale, most of our teachers do this. The question you always have to ask yourself is, why don't we? Or what would hold us back from making those modifications? And I think for a lot of us, the extra work and the extra thinking can be frustrating, but if you do this on a regular basis, it'll make teaching much easier and much more fun for you in the long run. The benefits of mastering 3D. You increase student engagement. Students see their learning is valued and addressed, leading to higher levels of participation and motivation, improved student achievement. Instruction is tailored to student-specific needs, resulting in better mastery of learning objectives and academic growth, and it's a more dynamic learning environment. It starts to make sense. Kids come to school, they come to your classroom a little bit more excited because they know that the feedback that they're getting is very specific and targeted, and it makes sense for them. Mastering Component 3D creates a more effective and engaging learning experience for all students, leading to better outcomes and a stronger classroom community. In conclusion, Component 3D is about creating a classroom culture where assessment is an integral part of the learning process. By using data to inform our decisions, we can create more effective and engaging learning experiences for all students. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time on our virtual professional development. Have a great day.